Welcome to Rational Discourse Weekly at 37G. This week we got some new articles for you, new Metaphysics 101. I hope you'll check out. And as for the podcast,
this week we talk about massacres and tragedies related kind of more recently to the shooting in Connecticut. Some of the debate and responses it sparked in regards to not having God in schools, and sort of our take on that. And we hope you enjoy. So there's a topic we don't really want to dive in too much, but it brings us to some interesting conversation about atheism and secularism in schools, and that's the recent shooting that happened in Connecticut.
yeah.
Obviously, our thoughts and everything go out to the families affected. It was a horrible, horrible thing. Unfortunately, it seems that some people like to use it as a way to say that secularism and atheism somehow was the driving force behind
It's what
tragedies.
allowed it to happen.
Yeah,
in a
what
sense.
allowed it to happen.
And by it, we mean, I think, any tragedy of this type.
Yeah, whether it
You know.
be bombings, shootings, stabbings.
Yeah. Anything mass
Yeah, anything that
trauma, basically, to the nation.
I guess
seems
you
to
can
cause problems.
quantify outside of like a one-on-one rage incident.
Yeah. I think this particular incident has just been painful, and just because it's children. I mean, it just strikes a different nerve. You know,
Yeah.
there's an innocence factor which I think drives up the feeling of it being a true tragedy. You know, at least with adults, although it's terrible, I feel that you can still in some way be like, well, they still lived, or I mean, they at least had some life. You know, they at least could maybe comprehend what was going on. It wasn't just so mindlessly heinous in the same way that I think an attack on, especially such young children,
Young,
Was it-
innocent children that can barely defend themselves. Like,
I mean, it
they're-
strikes a
they're at
different
that age.
tone. I mean, I think that's the big thing. And so I think this time when it goes, whether it's the gun control debate, which of course was instantly brought back into the public mind, or whether it's talks about, you know, basically the causes of it, I think this time it's a little more poignant because of who was the victim.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I bring it up is Mike Huckabee. He wasn't the only one. There were preachers on Fox News and some people on individual blogs and stuff that were saying similar things. And of course, bringing it into social media, this is stuff that gets cascaded. These messages just flow all over Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of things that we want to publicly disagree with and sort of explain why. But Mike Huckabee, he was doing an interview about the shootings on Fox News, and he was asked kind of a common question that people ask, or that the religious ask when situations like this come up: why would God let such a thing happen? And Mike Huckabee specifically says that we shouldn't be surprised with this kind of violence happening when we've systematically removed God from our schools. Yeah. And I think people like him are frankly upset.
I mean, they're
that-
sincere in the belief.
Yeah.
They're equally upset, and it's not to say that they're being callous. Though I think to us it comes off as callous, and
Yeah.
I think that's what gets at us, is the fact that we can look at something like this and simply be mad and hurt and upset, and we can empathize and sympathize with the people who are dealing with it personally. But I don't feel the need then to maybe offer up a justification like that to somehow.
Yeah, almost we don't care to try to make it some religious debate. We're not somehow trying to blame this tragedy on Christianity or on religion in general.
But I think it is fair to say, though, I mean, he's being genuine, I believe. I mean, people who have this thought, I don't think are trying to use it as like a cheap inroad. I think they're trying to genuinely say, look, we could prevent future tragedies of this type by allowing God back into the schools. And I think, though, that's where we come in and say, okay, although I think maybe you understand the hurt. We're all on the same page there. We all agree that this was terrible. There's no doubt we then have to react to, now where do we go? What is the proper response to something of this type? And his response is to reintroduce God to public schooling. Well, that now is something we cannot agree with and countenance. And so, as much as we hate, I think, for these things to become politicized, given that future action now has to be taken, we have to figure out how best to address it.
I think the more obvious answer, instead of trying to, somehow blame secularism or the removal of public prayer, or I don't know. I don't know if his solution is handing out Bibles to students, but I think it's pretty obvious to most other people that the solution is public discussion on gun control. Now, I'm not trying to say, where that should sway one way or the other, but
we're not touching on the debate itself, just that there will be a debate.
And maybe there should be a debate. Like, maybe there actually is an answer that could come from that. I don't know.
Well, a debate should be had. I think we can agree on that. The outcome is completely irrelevant to us.
Then things like mental health. I think those two debates obviously can shed a lot more light on these tragedies and why they're so frequent in the U.S. when they aren't as frequent around the world.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to blame it on
secularism, which is usually how it's labeled.
And I don't understand, just statistically, most of these kids are brought up in Christian families anyways. We're all for keeping religion in people's private lives. If you're in a public school, you shouldn't start telling everyone that Jesus Christ is their Lord and Savior. You shouldn't public school
proselytize from the public sphere, because first of all, who's to say what you should be discussing? So I mean, that's a huge potential problem right there. I mean,
yeah, you can't really,
because it's not just us. Can you imagine how the Hindu or the Buddhist or the Muslim feels when there's a crucifix on the wall? I mean, I can only imagine that their feeling is similar to mine, which is, I don't like that that's there because you seem to be imposing something on me that is unwanted and I believe is wrong. I mean, this is something that's a fundamental disagreement people have.
Yeah.
But in any case, I think the idea is, there's a couple different ways we can approach what they mean. So again, I believe that Huckabee was genuine in feeling that this is a solution to a problem, and that the problem is that in order to combat violence, basically God needs to be a greater part of public discourse. Now, we can argue the merits of that, but in a sense, I think the more important question is, are we talking about that this happened as if God couldn't prevent it or wouldn't prevent it because he was not in the school? Basically, like, because he was shunned, he therefore shunned? Or was this because children and people in general are not raised with a fear of God, they are therefore more capable and willing to do these horrible acts? And
yeah, I was going to say, because usually it seems like it also gets pointed at the killer, like whether or not the killer was a religious person. And
so if it's the former, I mean, that's basically a theological question. Is God, in a sense, like bartering with you? Like, you have to trade worship for protection. And that's something that we basically have no say on whatsoever, because that's purely within your faith that you're going to argue what God's role is in your daily life.
Yeah.
Now, if it's the latter question, though, of whether or not godlessness is the cause of all these evils, I think there are many, many statistics we can point at that basically show that violent crime has actually been on a downward trend historically from the early 1900s down to today. Now, these sort of mass shootings are on the rise, so there's no doubt that not all statistics have gone downwards. But to say that the fact that I think people who would do violence maybe 50 years ago, probably, to me, I think the obvious answer is simply didn't have the means to do the level of carnage that is now available with, assault rifles and extended mags and things like that. So it's not that maybe someone in 1950, I mean, there was a shooting on, I believe it was Texas, I'm probably wrong, but I believe it was Texas A&M campus. Guy got up in a bell tower with a bunch of rifles and was shooting people from the bell tower. And he killed, I believe it was over a dozen people. I know he wounded many others too. He just went on a rampage. Now, what if he had, though, a semi-automatic AR-15 with an extended clip? I mean, he could have been firing shots a lot faster than with a bolt-action rifle, which is what I believe he was using from the bell tower. This is 60 years ago. You know, Protestant America was pretty well defined. I think we all could agree that that was the main mindset. So that seems to be the heyday everyone wants to go back to, and yet we can point to examples where the same level of violent tendency was still there. Maybe the means have simply changed.
Yeah.
So now it's not a question of like why, basically how. People will snap, and now when people will snap, can they do greater damage given just the current state of armament that they can get their hands on?
Well, and I don't think religion or lack of religion is a vehicle that they use to kill. I think it might be an excuse. In the case of religion, they might say, well, I can kill because I've heard voices in my head, and it'll be okay because, you know, God will forgive me for these things. I'm just trying to right an injustice. Yeah. Whatever their cause may be, it could be with religion or without religion. But there's some crazy evil, if you want to use that term. There's some crazy evil people out there. It doesn't really matter what they believe in as far as religion goes. They're still just bad people.
People will be broken. People are broken and will be broken mentally. Some of those will be prone towards violent tendencies.
Yeah.
I read an interesting article. It was really just an editorial. It was from, can't remember her name. Something soccer mom. I could find it again. We can link to it. But basically, she's talking about she has a child who is basically mentally unstable. I think he was 10 or 12, something like that. And she says, I love my child, but I'm genuinely terrified of him. I'm genuinely afraid of him because he can be sweet and loving, and then something will set him off. And his immediate reaction is, I'll kill you. I'll kill myself. He's grabbed knives in the house and started attacking people with them. And this is a 10-year-old. I mean, this is not a person who I think we could say is like committed to a life of evil.
Yeah.
This is someone who's way too young for that sort of commitment. So it's obvious that this is a problem, and I don't think it has anything to do with godlessness. I think it has to do with mental health, which to me seems like the obvious answer, because I know as someone who is emphatically godless, my heart goes out to those people. I feel the empathetic response. I'm not sociopathic simply because I've tossed religious morality out the window.
Yeah, when people bring up the religion debate and they're saying that, you know, people are less likely to commit acts like murder if they know that there's a judge waiting after this life, that argument is basically saying that the only thing, you know, preventing you from killing is the fact that you believe in a God.
It's like the divine cop on the beat, basically, who's gonna get you in the end.
I don't know about you, but I don't feel like killing anyone, and I don't believe in a God. There's nothing, you know. In fact, if anything else, and this is another debate in its own, but I feel like atheists have a lot more to lose. We don't believe in an afterlife. So if we screw up this life, we're done.
Yeah.
We've only got one chance. I'm not a Buddhist. I don't believe in reincarnation.
Yeah.
I don't believe in eternal freedom in heaven. So,
yeah. Well, now to be fair,
my decisions are.
To go back to this, I think it not only goes to the idea that you'll be punished. Like, I mean, the idea is I think that justice needs to be served, and I think that's a very comforting thing that religion provides that we simply philosophically cannot. This person walked in, did a heinous thing, and then killed himself. We will never feel that justice was served for the people whose lives were lost. That man was in total control and then ended on his own terms. And we feel rightfully, I think, slighted by that we never got our chance to express our outrage at the very person who deserved it most. Now, it's comforting to think that he's in hell, he's burning, he's getting his. I can't provide an intellectual equivalent to that from an atheistic standpoint. I don't have anything. This man basically did something horrible and I guess you could say got away with it. And that's how it's going to be. But to me, that's still an easier answer and a simpler answer than trying to justify it within a religious context.
Well, I could say, and this is a bit of a stretch, but the only kind of positive outcome for things like this is that public discourse happens, that people have these. We're since the beginning of time, we've been looking for a more advanced society. Tried to fit in with people that we don't belong in. I've seen some interesting videos before that talk about how early man, identified with his direct neighbor, and then eventually identified with people of like religion, like color, nationhood, and we're becoming more of a world that identifies with each other regardless of your location, or we connect through social networks. Maybe I'm talking to someone in Brazil that plays Magic the Gathering. We're literally just trying to find connections in any way possible. It doesn't matter what country or what religion, or we can connect on almost any front.
Yeah, but and, we do find unified purpose in tragedy. There's no doubt. 9/11. These mass shootings.
There's always
Pearl Harbor.
There's always something to learn.
Historically, it's things like this, the ultimate tragedies, the ultimate sacrifices that bring us together most. Our empathetic responses go out the most strongly to everyone else. I remember distinctly sitting in my 10th grade lit classroom, walking in and seeing one of the towers just spewing smoke. And I remember that entire day vividly. I remember the anger and the disbelief and everyone just looking at one another.
You and I had math together, and we actually she basically didn't teach any math that day. We just watched the news.
And I remember specifically the feeling of connectedness in that moment of tragedy. And so these sort of events, in a way, I think bring out our most human response, which is to feel sympathy and empathy for one another. And I think that's a good thing. I think that shows, in a sense, that regardless of all of the other things that we believe in that differ, we all can agree on certain things. We can all come together about certain things. And in a sense, that demonstrates, I think, just the power of humanity in the vacuum without worrying about, was this God's vengeance or God's justice, or was this just a mindless, atheistic evildoer, or was this Satan, or any of the other answers that you could try and provide? Yeah. We can rise above all of that and just be human for a few weeks. And then, of course, as time moves on and the wounds heal and we start to now analyze the event with less of an emotional response, of course, now we're going to debate these other topics about why did it happen, what's the proper solution. But it's not that we ever want these things to happen, but I think we should treasure the moments when we actually are all on the same page about something. And this is one of the few times where we can all just say, this was a horrible thing. We wish it had never happened, and there's really nothing else that can be said.
You can't really turn back time.
No.
You can't really...
It is what it is. It's in the history books, and it's a terrible blemish, and that's it. But hopefully it can drive us to be better people. It can drive us to these conversations about how best to live together. What is the proper way to do it? And I think in a weird way, that is what we're trying to do here. That's, we're engaged in this conversation, the long-term conversation we want to have about the role of religion and what it is to live as a non-religious person. Because those are the important questions. And I think for us, because it is the only life that we've got, in our view, it's an incredibly important one. Because we got to get it right this time or we're never going to. So, there's my 2 cents.
And that's all we've got for tonight.
So, thanks for watching, and until next time. And when something like this, which is basically a religious solution... Hello, puppy. Can I help you? We'll just technical difficulties, folks. Anyone? Jaja? Anyone? Jaja?
Jaja!
You're just biting me. You're not leaving.
Hey, stay down. Go lick Mary. Lick her computer. It's hot.
So that pretty much killed the
Well,
thought process
it'll be
there.
a break.
Oh, yeah.